Hey there everyone, a photo reviews here, helping you decide, is that book worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? Now the month of September is coming to an end, and as we all saw, it wasn't a great month for terms of books. It deserves Mount Doom. With almost all the books on my main TBR ending up in Mount Doom, with the one that didn't surviving on a technicality, it's pretty safe to say that September's TBR was full of disappointments. Definitely exhausting to a degree, with the boring nature of Murder in the Hearst Degree and Da Vinci Code mixed with just the bad writing of The Grey Griffins, and don't even get me started on The Feral Detective. Honestly, I got pretty close to DNFing the Da Vinci Code too, but I decided to push through it because it was mostly just boring, unlike The Feral Detective, which I just did not like at all. Figured I'd just toss that out there, a little, quick fact. Thankfully, there was some shining lights that came through in my minor TBR. I managed to finish Dragons of the Autumn Twilight and found enough to talk about worth making a video on it. And it was definitely a good book. I was always interested in the Dragonlance setting, and although I had my complaints about it, and, one of the comments on there did bring up a good point. I may have been overthinking on how much foreknowledge you might have already known. You might already need to know going into the book. I still overall found it a good book even before that. And I am about halfway through the Falling Leaves book, as I mentioned in my last wrap-up TBR video. And it's pretty good as well. I'm not a big biography or memoir fan, but it's actually pretty gripping, and I'm interested in learning more about this author's life. I do apologize. I did say I had that one book, When We Left the World Behind, which has been in my TBR since July, I think. I would decide if I would DNF it or not this month, and I didn't, because I didn't really have a chance to return to it like I did with all the other books. It's still very weird. I really don't have a strong desire to return to it, so it probably is going to end up as a DNF, and I'm going to stop promising to do things by the end of the month, because as you can see with the lack of a video essay, I'm not doing very well on that, so I'd rather not promise than give false promises, as they say. But that's all in the past. But you know what they say, the past, it's history. So we'll be moving on to the future, where I discuss what my TBR for October is going to look like. Or should I say, the spooky season. Now, there's no point in me pretending that this month is going to be anything but spooky stories all month through. So dust off your R.L. Steins, crack open your Stephen Kings, and get ready to delve into your latest Bram Stoker. I probably should have switched to Stephen King and Bram Stoker. That's not the point here. Anyways, it is time to entrench ourselves within the realms of fiction that go where most other fictions don't, into the deep, dark abscesses of horror. And I will be doing that by taking up the challenge by fellow YouTuber Books of Blood, who has created the he's created the A to Z horror challenge and invited me to take place. Well, it was kind of an open invitation, but it sounds more special. It makes me feel more special if I say he invited me, so he invited me to take place. Now, for the exact specifics of the challenge, I really recommend that you go check out his video, which will be linked in the description. The basics of it is that he created an A to Z list of horror subgenres, and has challenged other fellow booktubers to go through them this October. Now, for this challenge, novels, novellas, short stories, and all that are considered fair game for this. And it goes from A to Z as said. Now, obviously, some letters have been cut out because Books of Blood couldn't find a good subgenre that fit in that specific letter. And that's, understandable. To be perfectly honest, what would K be? I don't know. I don't even think there's a subgenre of horror that fits into K. I'm overthinking this. Anyways, now, in his challenge, he says that I don't necessarily need to reach every single letter within this alphabet. Just, I can pick and choose which ones I want to do. However, I'm always something of an overachiever, and I'm going to attempt to strike every single alphabet letter in there. If not necessarily one book for every main point, like I will be trying to read a story that has the main subgenre there as its focus, rather than, as he suggested, rather than relying on the books that have one main genre but also branch into these other two subgenres as well. And I will use that if I end up running behind, don't get me wrong. I'm probably not going to finish it. I just want to try to see if I can, because it sounds interesting to me. However, that being said, there are two I probably won't be able to get to. That will be, one, the extreme horror tag, because for me, I don't necessarily... I'm not a big horror buff, as I've already talked about in the past with The Relic. And so when it comes to my shelves, most of it isn't horror. Most of it is sci-fi or fantasy. So when it comes to horror, I don't have a lot of them. So I'm not necessarily sure I would have anything for extreme horror on top of that. Yeah, like I said, to be honest, horror is not completely my jam. The second one is young adult fiction, and that's mostly because I already read the young adult horror book I know I have for sure, called The Night Gardener. If I'd known about this challenge before I had done that for my minor TBR, I would have saved it. But it feels like it'd be cheating to take a book I read only a month ago and count it. So, unfortunately, I probably don't have another YA novel to fill that gap. So yeah, fair warning, I will be trying to hit all of them, but I probably won't hit E or Y for sure. Creepy Kid is C. Might also not be there, but I have Stephen King up there, so I should have at least one Creepy Kid novel. So now, as for the rest, I will keep most of my TBR under wraps. Like, I'm not going to go into it, since listing all of the books I will be reading this month out will probably take a while. I'm mostly going to go through the main TBR. That is the videos I'll be publishing on Monday. I'll leave the other ones as a surprise for those of you who are watching. Now, I'll try to publish most of the other ones on, the Thursday, Friday, like I do with other videos. And like I said, this month will be almost dedicated entirely to horror reading. I'm not even going to try to do I'm not going to assure you I'm going to try to get to the video essay or anything like that, because I won't. Fun fact, I actually did try to do the video essay this year, but for some reason, when I recorded, there was this woo 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 in the background the entire time. And so the whole audio for it was just garbage. And since it would be mostly audio, how I'm working it, yeah. I'm getting off track. Let's get to the main TBR. The first book is something I actually promised a while ago, back when I was talking about... When I did my Star Wars EU video, I talked about how I have a whole shelf of EU novels, including one that... Star Wars Zombies. Yeah, this was actually... Fun fact. This is actually my oldest EU novel that I own. And it's not the first one I read. It probably fallen fourth or fifth of the EU novels that I actually read. But this is the first Star Wars EU novel I owned personally. I got it as a birthday present with some Barnes & Noble's gift card as a kid. Because it's Star Wars and it's zombies. It looked amazing. And I was like young at the time, like 8 maybe. No, not 8, that's too young. Like 12 or 13. Point is, it was all about Star Wars and it was all about zombies then. So I picked it up because it looked interesting. Here's the synopsis. When in the Imperial Purge, temporary home to 500 of the galaxy's most ruthless killers, rebels, scoundrels, and thieves, breaks down in a distant part of the space, its only hope appears to lie with the Star Destroyer found drifting and seemingly abandoned. But when a boarding party from the Purge is sent to scavenge for parts, only half of them come back, bringing with them a horrific disease so lethal that within hours, nearly all aboard the Purge die in ways too hideous to imagine. And death is only the beginning. The Purge's half-dozen survivors will do whatever it takes to stay alive, but nothing can prepare them for what lies waiting aboard the Star Destroyer. For the dead are rising, soulless, unstoppable, and unspeakably hungry. I've actually already read this book, so I can't really give a fair, unbiased opinion on the synopsis right here, but honestly, that gripped me as a kid, and I actually linked this to one of my friends, fellow YouTuber Rukari, back when we were kids, and high schoolers, and she found it terrifying. It's worth a shot. See if it held up after all these years. Now, the next book is another expanded universe novel taking place in a sci-fi setting. However, it will not be taking place in Star Wars. This book was I actually learned about this book through a fellow booktuber, much bigger than myself, named Crimson Rogue. I highly enjoy his content, and anyone willing to take my suggestion on what constitutes good booktube content, I would suggest going to check him out. Again, link in the description. But he brought it up during one of the times he was talking about his bad books, those huge, long, bad book reviews that he does. And he was using it as a comparison. Now, ever since then, I had kept an eye out for it, and I'd even put it on my main I will buy this new if I have to list. However, I was able to find it in a thrift store, and that book is Dead Space Martyr by B.K. Evanson. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dead Space is a sci-fi universe where the basic idea, as it was described to me, I personally have never played the games, even though I've gotten real deep into the lore at one point. But Dead Space is basically the idea of what if when humanity goes into space, it's not that aliens never existed, it's that they've already all been killed out but us. So we're literally living in a dead space. I'm going to read you the synopsis. We have seen the future. A universe cursed with life after death. It all started deep beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, where an archaeological discovery took us into a new age, bringing us face to face with our origins and destiny. Michael Altman had a theory no one would hear. It cursed our world for centuries to come. This, at last, is his story. Now, based on that synopsis, this actually sounds a lot like a prequel novel, in a sense, to the original games. And I already know one small part in it, based on what Crimson Rogue talked about in his videos, but I know very little about this book. Ooh, apparently I found the original receipt for when it was bought. Oh, it was back when Hastings was still a thing. That should say something. But anyways, so it sounds somewhat like a prequel to the original universe, and if it is, that actually sounds somewhat interesting. So I hope this holds up. I hope it's pretty good, and I'll let you know. Now, the third book is something of a chance to me. I saw this in the bookstore, and I read it, and it honestly sounded somewhat interesting. It even promoted itself sort of like... It promoted itself as Anne Rice adjacent. And honestly, as someone who loves the Vampire Chronicles series, I really thought that was interesting. So I picked it up, and the third book of this month will be Lord of the Dead by Tom Holland. Not that Tom Holland, the other one. No, not him either. Who even is... No! It's not that Tom Holland. It's completely unrelated. British author. Okay? Okay, I'm just going to get into the synopsis here. Let's not get distracted. The famed 19th century poet and rake, Lord Byron, comes to life in a searing blend of fact and fiction. A shockingly brilliant novel with all the hypnotic power of Caleb Carr's The Alienist and the best of Anne Rice. Traveling in the mountains of Greece, Byron falls under the spell of a mysterious fugitive slave, whose pale, slim body arouses his lust. Utterly entranced, his fate is sealed. The supreme sensualist embarks on a life of adventure, that of the world's most formidable vampire. Chosen to enjoy powers beyond those any vampire has ever known, Byron enters a dark, intoxicating world of long-lost secrets, ancient arts, and scorching excesses of evil. He drinks deeply of terror and sex, but his diversions, delicious and cruel, were also his torment, an all-consuming thirst damning all those he loves. So yeah, this honestly really does sound a lot like Interview with the Vampire, but with a more explicit, I guess, taste. I haven't read any of it myself. I don't really know in what way it's going to be written, or even if it's going to be good. But I thought I'd take the chance. It sounded interesting, and you know what? What better time to read a vampire story than here? The fourth book of my Spooktober choosing is going to be very experimental, and that's going to be Damnation by Nick Paluda. I think that's how you pronounce it. Now, this is a book I found in the thrift store, as you can kind of see, because Goodwill just kind of likes slapping the stickers on there in such a way that it's almost impossible to pull it off without damaging the book. I saw this, and I needed to round out the amount of books I had for a small deal that had been going on at this time. So I decided to pick this up because it sounded mildly interesting. Now, I am slightly worried because it's got that cheap paperback quality that you typically see in these really bad books. Sort of like The Last Layover or something like that. I'm not anticipating it being bad, but I'm definitely going to be the most on guard when it comes to this one, as opposed to something like The Lord of the Dead, which might be awful, but it has that more professional quality look to it. You know what I mean? That being said, I'm going to read you the synopsis. So, amid the fury and chaos of the Civil War, something monstrous is feeding upon the wounded soldiers, leaving behind withered corpses, broken and twisted in unimaginable agony. Definitely not the work of a vampire. U.S. Marshal John Sanders is ordered by President Lincoln to stop the hideous deaths. Has the South unleashed a demon from hell? But the Marshal soon discovers that the mysterious enemy has been attacking every fallen soldier in the war, both Union and Confederate. President Jefferson Davis wants the unknown fiend stopped just as much as President Lincoln. Ruthlessly hunting a dark thing unafraid of guns, fire, silver, or holy water, the grim Marshal starts to believe that the killer is not a werewolf, vampire, demon, or anything else known in the lexicon of supernatural. This is something new, something horribly different, and the battlefield's deaths are only the beginning. It sounds interesting, and it does sound like it has a neat, interesting concept. I personally haven't read very many horror stories that take place in the far past that aren't typically about vampires, you know what I mean? I'm hoping this actually is pretty good as opposed to what the appearances of the book put out there. Now finally, the last Monday of the month, which is actually on Halloween, I'm going to leave as a surprise. Will I be reviewing a book at all? Will it be a bad book? Will it be a great book? Who knows? Maybe I haven't even decided yet, and I'm just stalling because I can't find a good second story. As for the minor TBRs, it's going to mostly be short stories and novellas, small stuff like that. Stuff I can probably crank out in 2 or 3 days of reading because, I read novels in about a week, so, I can handle a short story in that. But I got a whole bunch of these anthology series, like, this Prime Evil. It's got a whole bunch of short stories from prominent horror authors. Or I got a whole bunch of Stephen King's anthologies here. I actually have a specific story I think I'm going to get, but trying to see if I have the anthology that it's in. I also have the complete works of H.P. Lovecraft. So yeah, I have a lot of short story horror. And I'm actually looking forward to diving into it a little bit, seeing what it is. With that being said, I don't really have much else to say. Like I said, check out Books of Blood's A to Z announcement video to get a full detail of what's going on in this challenge. And he can explain it far better than I ever would. He literally made it, so. That being said, remember, with every book comes an adventure. And every adventure is worth having, even the terrifying one.